The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Everybody has their own story and their own journey to share. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines, the path not taken and the forgotten angle. Listen to the stories from others sharing their triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. Welcome to the journey within you. Today, I'm excited to have my dear sweet friend, Darlene Lee, and she's coming on to share her story. You guys, we all have a story to share. And so many times we keep it down inside, and there's somebody out there, even if it's one, needs to hear your story. So Darlene, share with us today your story.
Thank you, Laura, for having me on your podcast, The Journey Within You. And thank you so much for helping me on my journey to begin a podcast as well. You've been such a great friend and mentor. And just to tell you a little bit about where I am here, I live in Athens, Alabama. We've been here for about the time goes so fast. We've lived in our house 17 years. It's so funny because I was telling my Lyft driver about where I live, and I said, wait, 17 years, but I've lived in Athens like almost 30 years.
Wow. So that's home. That's home.
This is home. This is where we raised our girls and our son, Joe, that's 14. So, and my husband's a minister. He's been in ministry for 10 years. And all that time has just gone by so fast.
So fast.
So that's just a little bit about me. I grew up a minister's daughter, so we moved around about every 2 years until I was 10 years old. We lived in Ohio, Tennessee, and Louisiana, and then we moved to Illinois.
Oh,
and so I claim Illinois is where I grew up.
What part of Illinois were you in?
We lived in Washington, but it's right outside Peoria.
Yeah.
So most people know Peoria because of Caterpillar tractors being made there. Yeah. And I did work for Caterpillar while I was in high school. I co-opted and worked in their emergency shipping office for a couple of years. So that was a great opportunity.
We've done a lot of training out there. Area.
It's a beautiful area. Corn country. Lots of corn.
Yes. A lot of
but the dirt is black in Illinois instead of red like we have here in Alabama.
So when you left, did you graduate when you were in Illinois?
I graduated.
Okay.
Illinois.
And then where did you go from there?
Well, I decided to go to the University of Alabama. So I went to Tuscaloosa where my grandparents had lived for 20 years. My granddaddy was a pharmacist at Bryce Hospital. So I lived with them, and I started at Shelton State because a lot of the professors taught at that at both schools, and I was paying my own way. So it's like, I'm going to go to Shelton State. I'll get the same education.
Yeah.
And this will be a fraction of the cost. So that's what I did. And that's where I met Don, my husband.
Oh, okay.
We met in the registration line. Back then you had to stand in line. It wasn't
no more online stuff. Yeah.
And he and I met in the registration line, registering for School of Business.
How
cool. Back then it was like standing inside this hot building for 4 hours. And we got to talking. That was a lot of time to start talking, get to know each other. And he convinced me to sign up for an early morning Spanish class. And I had written a paper in high school on why high school should offer night classes because everybody's not a morning person.
Right.
And I was not going to take any morning classes, early morning classes. And that was the only one left open after standing in line for 4 hours. So I registered for the 7:40 a.m. Spanish class, and he was going to take that one anyway because he was working full time. And so he was like, oh, you need to sign up for this class because I'm going to need help.
Yeah.
He didn't need any help. He was fresh out of the Marines and already fluent in multiple languages, Special Forces unit. But that worked to my advantage because since he was good at languages, we made like a 99 in that class.
For a little bit of help, right?
Uh-huh.
We
Uh-huh.
don't
We were
deny the help.
partners. The
Yeah.
teacher was like, "Oh, I forgot to tell y'all to buy these tapes." That's how old I am. Go, y'all were
Uh-huh.
supposed to buy these tapes and listen to them as your lab for
Well, let
Spanish
me tell you,
class.
when I had to learn my multiplications, because of us as a preacher's daughter too, we
Mm-hmm.
moved a bunch of times and multiplications was just not my thing. So we listened to them on a record player. That's how I learned
Wow, that
my
is so
multiplications
cool,
over and
Laura.
over. So yeah, we're aging ourselves just a little, just a little bit. So after you got through, how long were you in college?
I ended up going for a semester
Mm-hmm.
and I was working three jobs
Oh
and
gosh.
stopped to save more money and go back the next semester. I had a little bit of a scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know I had a scholarship for a second semester.
Right.
So I would stop to save more money, keep working those three jobs. Meanwhile, Don and I are already dating because we were
Oh,
doing that
yeah.
lab together. And I was going over to his house to study, which we
Yeah.
did. And so we ended up getting married 9
Oh,
months. We knew each other 9 months and we got
and then
married.
got married.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yep.
in
So
Illinois.
we had an
So,
Alabama wedding. We
and
were
had
in
an Alabama
Alabama.
wedding.
Mhm.
Oh,
Everybody
so all
came
your
to
family.
Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
We had it overlooking the river, an outdoor
Mm-hmm.
wedding. It was
Oh,
beautiful in
beautiful.
April
Oh,
30th.
that's a great time of the year too in that area.
In the
So,
spring.
so now we're fresh married, and what kind of career paths were you heading in that time?
Well, Don already worked in safety for a trucking company, and
Mhm.
he was their safety manager. And he was studying business. And I always wanted to be a stay-at-home wife and stay-at-home
Mhm.
mom.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's how I was raised. So
Oh,
once I married, I just started homemaking.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And that's a joy. I mean,
It
that's something to be
is.
proud of and to be,
Mhm.
thankful for that you were
I'm
able to
so
do that.
thankful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And Don really was great to always support me in that. And,
Mm.
just we had a little apartment on 15th Street. And we just loved it. It
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
really good days. I was learning how to cook because
Yeah.
my mom was always sick and we just ate easy things. And so I had a Betty Crocker recipe book and
Yes.
I was
Don't you
getting
love
that.
that red and white book?
Uh-huh. Yes,
We all got
exactly.
those for our wedding anniversary present or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
I had that red and white checkered book, and I
Mhm.
was making all kinds of recipes out of it
Mhm.
on our little two burner
Yeah.
stove in this little apartment.
Yeah.
And we were just having so much fun.
Oh. So I
So,
know there's lots of good things, but
mhm.
I'm sure there were some struggles. And what are some of your struggles that you've had over these years that up to where you are today?
Well, we were married and things were going along. There was early in the months of our first few months of marriage, there was just sort of like a shock that my husband
Mhm.
went through. Just almost like cold feet after the wedding and
Yeah.
instead of before.
Right.
And I think some of that is normal, just
Yeah.
adjusting to
Scared.
married life and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, all the things. How are we going to do our money?
Mm-hmm.
What is life going to be like?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still okay to go out to lunch with a girl?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these things that we had to navigate, like,
Right.
you're married now. You don't just
Mm-hmm.
take another woman to
Mm-mm.
lunch.
Mm-mm.
Don and I are 8 years apart. So I was 19, he was 27.
Oh, wow.
And he had world traveled. He was raised an army brat, as
Mm-hmm.
they say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, his dad wasn't a churchgoer. His mom was very much a churchgoer, and Dawn went with her
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
grew up going, kind of like the Boy Scouts, but it's like
Right.
the
Right.
church kind,
Awana type thing. Yeah.
Awana.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he was in that. And so Don's always had such a great heart and a love
Mm-hmm.
for God and has such a good, strong conscience to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of us have different traumas from childhood.
Yes.
It just varies what it is. A lot of us don't even understand that was trauma. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
hey, something
Mm-hmm.
that happened when I was
Right.
growing
Right.
up. And so we started having a family. We had been married 18 months. I found out I was pregnant with our first
Oh,
daughter.
yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
know we were having a girl till
Oh,
we
no, because
had
you didn't
her.
find out back
I
then.
didn't find
Nope.
out.
I didn't either.
Um, and so we had daughter number one, and then 3 years, 2 years, 9 months later, we had daughter number two. And then 2 years minus one day, we had daughter number three. So May
Oh my
12th, she
gosh.
was born, and daughter number two, her birthday was on May 13th. So, just having so much fun raising these little girls. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's a lot of hard work, but I
Yes.
just loved having children and was so
Mm-hmm.
thankful I could have children
Mm-hmm.
because some of the things going on with me, I even told Don when we were dating, I'm not sure if I'll be able to have
Right.
children.
Right.
And so I was just thrilled and so
Yeah.
thankful. And Don was just working. He finished his degree.
Mm-hmm.
He finished it from Athens State University. We moved here we moved to Decatur
Mm-hmm.
when the first daughter was 14 months old. And
Oh.
then we started a church here in
Mm-hmm.
Athens. And then before daughter number three was born, we moved to Athens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so Don went back in the military full time. He at first was AGR, where you're working contract to
Right.
contract,
Right.
and he did that while after we had daughter number two. Some things didn't pan out. The trucking company was going to open a
Mm.
terminal here, and that's what brought us to Athens.
Mm-hmm.
But that it didn't end up panning out, so he
Oh
went back in the
my.
military full time.
Yeah.
So then he got hired on full time, and that's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
He's on him. He's working contract to contract, hoping for another contract.
Mm-hmm.
Those contracts
Mm-hmm.
only last like 3 months.
Yeah.
He delivered pizzas to help supplement our income so I could stay home with the babies. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, I just figured some of his demeanor and things he was acting out was stress.
Yeah.
But in 2005, one day, that this is back when you got an itemized phone bill, I noticed there was
Yeah.
some phone calls, and I was like, I confronted him. I called one of my
Right.
friends to come get the little girls, and I confronted him about it. And he said, I'm just talking. We're just
Mm-hmm.
talking. Nothing's
Mm-hmm.
going on. And then that was when a conversation happened late, not much later, about I'm not happy,
Yeah.
and I'm going to share about that on my
Okay.
podcast that launches Monday.
Yes.
Um, but, I was shocked because
Yeah, I
I
bet.
really had no clue
Mm-hmm.
anything was. We had such a great marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, all the things that you hope for to be
Mm-hmm.
happening
Mm-hmm.
were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just really didn't make sense to me
Right. Right.
that he would be saying, I'm not happy.
Mm.
But that's where we were. And we had sort of a little bit of time where he just sort of said, I'm just thinking about leaving. And then he decided he wasn't going to leave. And
Hmm.
that was kind of started a honeymoon period again
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And so my hair is wet. I told Laura today is hair wash day. Is I have to wash my
I
hair
tell
and it
y'all to
takes
come as you
forever to
are.
dry. So
That's what this is
um
about. Be
I'm
you.
I've got my little towel over here to catch
Yeah.
strips. But it started a honeymoon period, and that was a great time. And then he deployed to Iraq.
Oh,
And we stayed in touch through Skype. It was really like something out of a movie, writing love
yeah.
letters and
Yeah.
all of that back and forth. And then he
Mm-hmm.
got home in 2008. And, it's hard on a
No, it has
soldier
to
to
be.
come home.
Oh, I can't imagine.
It's almost like going from one planet to
To
another
another.
planet.
Mm-hmm.
He said, just for example, how hard it is. He had worked in his office. He was an admin clerk, full time, military,
Yeah.
Army, National Guard for Alabama. And he said, when I got home, I couldn't remember any of the phone numbers.
Mm,
He goes back to
mm.
his first day of work behind the desk at
And
home,
he's
at
like,
his home office, and he's like, I can't remember any of the phone numbers. And so he had to relearn some things
yeah.
because he was working 16-hour days,
Mm,
7 days a week. He
mm.
only had half a day off, one day a
Wow.
week.
Wow. That's so
And
stressful.
yes, and he has PTSD from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But his PTSD, he did earn a Bronze Star, but his is more like burnout. But
Yeah.
he can get triggered if he's working too many hours
Overload.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can just get triggered and
Mm-hmm.
it sort of can make him shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to be careful on,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got a great job now. But that when he came home in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
then I just knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem like PTSD. There was something else. And I just started asking him. I remember one day asking him, what, what's wrong? What's
Mm-hmm.
wrong? What's
Mm-hmm.
wrong? And finally, he confessed. He confessed something to me. And that triggered me to leave. I
Yeah.
left. I took my girls and
Mm.
left, and for about a month. But then, meanwhile, we had a really great church family and really good leadership,
That's
and they
good.
were working to try to help us. And
Yeah.
we got started with a marriage counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and so I came back, and that was interesting times too.
I bet.
That
I
counselor
bet.
he had a background of being Navy, and we'd go for like, it was supposed to be an hour session, but it'd be like 2 hour sessions, and
Oh
we'd
my
talk about
goodness.
almost nothing related to us. But
Yeah.
then when we would leave, he and I would talk,
You're
and
right.
really, God just used it, and God
Mm.
will use things and
Mm-hmm.
people. It
Mm-hmm.
may feel
Mm-hmm.
like this isn't working because
Right.
it
It feels
doesn't
odd.
meet
This ain't
our
right.
expectations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we can put our expectations aside and lean into, well, hey, God can use this for my good,
Mm-hmm.
then He will.
You will.
He will.
You
And
sure
that's
will.
what He did. And so we actually we weren't divorced, but you know how you can have a second wedding.
Right.
We
Right.
did that. We renewed our
Oh,
vows. Our
how
minister
beautiful.
and his wife came over. We renewed our vows,
Mm-hmm.
and then had our little honeymoon night and got pregnant with Joe.
Oh,
So he's our reconciliation
yeah.
baby. So
Yeah. Oh.
it's so special, and that's part of why we named him Joseph Samuel, is
Oh.
because Josephs in the Bible were all really good men
Mm-hmm.
that chose to do the right thing, and Samuel was always wanted by his mom Hannah, and she prayed and prayed, and I'd always wanted 4 children, and
Oh.
we had a son.
How
So
about that? You had your
mhm,
girls and you got your boy. That's beautiful.
yes,
So how long
yes.
have you guys been married now?
We've been married April will be 30 years, our
Wow.
30th wedding
That
anniversary.
is so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
God is
Yeah.
good. He's
Yes.
good. So
In
some things.
2019, I want to share this part with
Okay.
you. Things were not going well again. And we had already, like I said, been to marriage counseling. We
Mm-hmm.
had found another couple to go to that was a couple that
Oh,
counseled,
nice. Yeah.
started learning about codependency. Dawn was just completely shutting down in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how can this be? Because we've done so much
So
work,
growth.
right?
Yeah. So much
Since
growth.
2005 is when I saw
Mm-hmm.
those numbers on the phone bill.
Mm.
So here we are, it's 2019. We've done so much work, so much
Mm-hmm.
growth, so many good things, some even healing, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
so much healing. But in 2019, Don was just shutting down. He wasn't, he was going to the sessions, but he wasn't opening up.
Not
He
opening
wasn't
up.
bringing his homework. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't wasn't really there, even
Yeah.
though he was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And we still went for, like 2 years.
Oh.
Um, and really this backs up a little bit before that we had been going to that couple. But by 2019, I called another counselor, and I just, and my dad actually encouraged me. We
Mm.
were talking in the car on the way to one of his
Daddies
doctor's
are good like
appointments,
that.
and he
Mm-hmm.
said, why don't you just call? I had heard about this man, Art Adams, who runs Leaving the Pit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a counseling, and he runs retreats, and
Mm-hmm.
he actually addresses sex addiction. That's
Okay.
what he specializes in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called him. I just dropped my dad at his appointment while I was waiting that in July. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a hot day. I'm
Mm.
calling from my hot car. Air is running, but it's still hot. I call him and I just start saying, what do I need to do? He doesn't know me. I'm
Mm-mm.
just talking. I'm
You're
just
just
like,
going at it.
what do I need to
Help.
do? He's like,
Yeah.
well, first, I
Mm-hmm.
need to have an appointment with you, and I need to have an appointment with him on through Skype.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked Don, will you meet with him? And reluctantly, he said,
He
yes,
did.
I will. And so I met with Art myself, and he met with him.
Yeah.
And that started us learning about addiction, and
Mm-hmm.
that this
Mm-hmm.
was not really just a marriage issue. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that we just needed marriage counseling. It
Mm-hmm.
was we needed addiction
No
counseling.
problem. Yeah. Yeah.
And when we started to address it as addiction,
Mm-hmm.
progress started happening big
Right. But
time.
you're getting to the root of the problem.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I started at first, it was more really hard things. We actually did an in-house separation.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't move out, he moved to a different bedroom. And that was hard times, because
Mm-hmm.
when somebody is an addict, they really need help.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted him to go to in-house. There are in-house
Right.
rehabs for that addiction.
Right. Right.
Very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
We just tried. We tried in staying home
Right.
and going to the counselor online.
Mm-hmm.
And by God's grace, that worked for
That
us.
worked.
But again, it may not
May
work for
not for someone
everybody.
else.
They may
Right.
need
Right.
in-house, because
Right.
sex addiction is porn, and
Mm-hmm.
porn addiction is 5 times more addictive than heroin. The
I can believe
amount
that.
of chemicals released in the
Mm-hmm.
brain is
Mm-hmm.
5 times more
Mm.
than heroin
Mm.
addiction. So you're not going to get off of that by yourself.
Mm-mm.
You're
No.
not just going to pray and I'm sorry
Right.
and be over it.
Right.
It's a real addiction. And
Yes.
so he had to do his 90 meetings in 90 days. And he did great. He started going to
Mm-hmm.
all the meetings he could find. And it was hard because it started being the pandemic real
Oh,
quick once
yeah. Yeah.
because
Trying to work
I
through
started
that.
my 12 step in September of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
He started a little bit after that. So here we are, it's 2020,
2020.
and meetings start shutting down.
Oh
And
my
that's
goodness.
really a big part of what's going on with our country, in my
Right.
opinion,
Right.
is, not only did churches have to close because of pandemic, but
Mm-hmm.
all
But
the
so many other
meetings.
things. Yeah.
Yes, all
The
the meetings,
counseling
all
and
the
all the things.
AA,
Yeah.
Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
There's lots of 12-step programs that are
That had to
great.
shut the doors.
There was no meetings. There was
Mm.
even other kinds, there's a lot of kinds of
Yeah.
addictions, right?
Yes.
The eating addictions that people have, they go to Weight
Mm-hmm.
Watchers or
Mm-hmm.
Jenny Craig or
Right.
Nutrisystem or whatever, and they
And
have
that
their
was their
counselor.
connection that kept
It
them
all
going. Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah. I
Yes.
didn't think about all
We're
that.
rebuilding right now. We're
Yeah, we are.
still in a rebuilding our
Mm-hmm.
lives kind of time.
Yeah.
Just healing from more trauma that
Oh,
was
big
layered
time.
on because of no support,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't there. Some places did Zoom, but a lot of those places were scared to do Zoom because you have complete anonymity and
Yeah.
confidentiality in these
Yeah.
meetings, the recovery ones, and they could not guarantee that
Mm.
when
So that made
when you're
that
on
very
Zoom.
difficult.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, how do we do this? They just didn't
Mm.
have experience. So, fortunately for me, my 12-step class continued to meet and I graduated. And so, what I figured out I had struggles in was emotional eating and workaholic. I was a
You kept
workaholic.
yourself busy just to try to block it all out.
Yes, I
And you
was in,
eat because you're
yep.
just like,
It
yeah.
was a definite cycle
Mm-hmm.
because I was putting my identity in reaching my work goals, which
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always happen, real
No,
life.
no.
And if I didn't hit my goal, then I'm turning to food.
Yeah.
For comfort. I'm
Yeah.
turning to food for comfort and the stress of trying
Mm-hmm.
to reach the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And even just more trauma moments
Mm-hmm.
as we're still working in getting into recovery ourselves in our
Mm-hmm.
home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just lots of
Yeah,
emotional
that's
eating
something
to
I think
overcome.
people need to understand because I think they go, okay, he went through the 12 street program and he went through the 90 days and he's all good.
Mm,
No,
mm-mm.
it is going to be an everyday thing now for the
It's
both of you,
ongoing.
for anyone that's healing or anyone getting out of an addiction. It
Mm.
is ongoing. It never
Yes.
stops. You have the
Mm-mm.
tools and you've been given the tools, but now you've got to carry on with that. And I'm sure you can still pop in a meeting if you
Oh,
feel the
yes. We
need.
still go to our meeting every
Okay.
Friday night.
Oh, cool.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you
So
have
it's
to
a
have, it's just like
lifestyle.
us. Yeah, we have a lifestyle of needing that communication and being with people. If you don't put yourself in front of people, then you are, you start going down. You
You
feel alone.
relapse. You
Yeah.
can
I lived,
relapse.
I lived in my first life with my husband, my ex-husband. He was porn addiction and it
Hmm.
was bad and it
Hmm.
was not good and he wouldn't get help for it. And it was not
Hmm.
an easy thing to live with and be a part of. And I remember the struggles in that until I finally got the courage to get out of it. Because
Hmm.
we did do a marriage counseling thing, but he would not admit to anything that he was doing. So I'm like, well, this is just kind of pointless if we're not
Yes.
going to change.
Mhm.
So
And I just
yes.
want to say that Don and I both decided we would go public with our story. So
Hmm.
I'm not speaking out of turn. Don
Right,
shares his
right,
own story,
right.
and we are beginning our own 12-step program here locally,
That's
Recovery
awesome.
Through Christ, February
Uh-huh.
1st.
Awesome.
So, Don, and the way that works for people who've never gone before and are like, wow, that might could help
That'd
me.
be something. Yeah.
The large group meets together, men and women in large group, and then you have small group that's the
Mm-hmm.
women only and the
Mm-hmm.
men only, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a time where you get to do more
To
healing. And
use.
recovery
Mm-hmm.
through Christ is a little bit different. In Celebrate Recovery, you have open sharing. Each person gets 5 minutes in small group,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in
Mm-hmm.
with Recovery Through Christ, the small group is the 12-step
Okay.
study.
Okay.
So
You break it
I'm
down into a
excited.
smaller level so they feel more
Yes.
easier at sharing and
And some
talking.
people may like that more because sometimes you don't always know what to share
Yeah.
in open sharing, even in a small group.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this will be more structured. There'll be a question asked, and then you
They'll be
can
able to
answer.
answer it. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And you go around the room, every person gets a
Oh, okay.
chance to
Oh.
answer uninterrupted. And
Mm-hmm.
again, full anonymity and
Right.
confidentiality. What's
Right.
shared in the group stays in the group.
That's
So,
good. And I like how you separate it too. So the women are with they're the women and the men are with the men and they can
mhm.
feel confident enough to talk in front of each other. And that
Right. You
starts
really
February the
develop
1st.
friendships that are
Mm-hmm.
real,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're in this kind of situation, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot that you just keep to yourself. You end
Yeah.
up in isolation a
Yeah.
lot. You don't have people over. You don't go out that much. There's not a lot of stability.
Well, we were the opposite because
Y'all were the opposite.
we had a lot of people come. We were the people that everybody came to our house. Everybody, we were very involved in our church
Mm-hmm.
so nobody really knew what I was living behind my closed doors. I kept a facade that everything's great. We're
Mm-hmm.
good. And when I did decide to leave the church that we were attending, of course, brought me in and they thought it was just like a little 2-week thing been happening and not my whole marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no,
this is an issue and this is something I cannot or will not stand for. And so they
Mhm.
read me out of the church. It
Oh
was
no.
pretty strange. But
Ugh,
after all
that's
those
so hard.
years, after those years though, I'd be out and about and I'd run into people from the church and they'd come running to me and like, I am so sorry,
Mhm.
because they realized how inhuman that was. That should
Mhm.
never have happened, but
No.
that's behind. And it's
Yes.
okay because I knew I was in line with God and what happened and what was going on in my life. And that's all that mattered, and I
You
was okay.
forgive. You've
Mm-hmm.
forgiven
I
it.
did.
And
Yeah.
forgiveness is so, so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part
Mm-hmm.
of what we learn in 12-step recovery is
Oh yeah.
amends, how to make amends with ourselves. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we blame ourselves for what's
Mm-hmm.
happened. Like, how could I not have seen this? How could I
Right.
have been fooled, in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
dark? Like in my case, I didn't have any idea what was going on. I just I just thought he was stressed from work.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on when I wasn't looking. And
Yeah.
I just knew I was busy raising my three little girls. We every night we read Bible stories sitting on
Yeah.
the couch, no matter
Yeah.
what time. And
Yeah.
he would be in his office,
Mm.
usually during that time, his home
Mm-hmm.
office.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just thought he grew up with a different kind of family. My
Right.
family was close and his family wasn't.
Right.
And I just thought it's
That's just his
hard for
norm.
him to
Yeah. Yeah.
connect at family
Yeah.
time. I just, I was just like this. I didn't make a big deal about it. I just
Right.
went with the flow, right?
Right.
Because I have three little girls. This is
Yeah.
precious time.
Yeah.
I want it to be great. And it was great. Of course, we still miss daddy. And
Yeah.
we just didn't know he was dealing with that. A lot of the time on his own, he was isolating because he
Yeah.
felt guilty and he wanted to stop, but he didn't
But
know
he
what
didn't
to
know how.
do.
Yeah.
And he couldn't, like, people will say, oh, they could stop. And I'm like,
No.
it's addiction. If you
Yeah.
really study the brain and the chemicals that are released, that you have to go through all the withdrawals and the rehab, and
Right.
it's kind of
Right.
like deciding not to eat for, well, maybe one day,
Yeah.
two, but by day three you're like, I gotta eat something, just talking about normal eating,
Yeah.
choosing
Yeah.
not, your brain, it thinks it has to have these chemicals to
Mm-hmm.
survive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to choose to go without that addiction,
Right.
without intervention.
Right. You
So
definitely got to have intervention. I believe that
yes.
100% in
Hmm.
anything as we go along in life, because you won't get over it and you'll keep burying it and you'll keep hiding it and you'll keep
And I
getting
think what
further
happens a
down.
lot, Laura, is the addict, and this could have been with your first husband, they get so hopeless and the reason they won't try, one, the guilt is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly massive guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And two, they just really lose belief in themselves that they
Mm-hmm.
can change.
Right.
They
Right.
just feel
And
like
I do
I
think there's
can't
some that
change.
fully don't want to change.
There's
They
some who
think they're
don't want
fine who
to.
they are, and I
Mhm.
think that was in the
They're
incident,
still in
sadly.
denial.
They're
And
in
that's step
denial.
one.
Yeah.
They got to
Yeah.
come out of denial.
Mm-hmm.
So they're standing over here. I don't have a problem. Nothing's wrong with
Right.
me.
Right.
And yes, that happens. That also happens,
Too
unfortunately, a
often.
lot. Mhm.
So
But
your move, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think that's why I'm so excited about having a recovery program here
Mm-hmm.
in our town, is
Mm,
because there will be some who are like, wait, if there is a recovery program, maybe I can.
maybe I
Maybe
could
I
connect.
can.
Yeah.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
Lord will move.
Yes,
There's
he
still
will.
that real person
Yeah.
in there, that not the addict brain
Right.
that's all changed and
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
There's still shreds of that actual
Oh,
original person in
definitely.
there
Mm-hmm.
that the Lord can work on
Mm-hmm.
and touch that heart. And good hearts can make it through and change and grow. So I'm a
And
firm
I
believer in
think
that.
just too with you two being open about it, and they think, well, they're sharing their story and they're coming out about it and look at where they've gotten and how it's helped them. So they'll say, well, maybe I could do this too then,
Mhm,
because so many don't think because maybe there's someone with a status, that they don't want anybody in their
mhm.
neighborhood to know. because you're a small
Right.
community.
You worry about
Yeah.
your job, you worry
Yeah.
about being,
Right.
people shunning you, no friends.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
really and truly, your real friends, your true friends
Yeah.
are going to respect you more.
Exactly.
Some of this is just about educating people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what what addiction is,
Mm-hmm.
all the kinds.
Yep.
And
There's
one
many.
thing, yes, shopping addiction, anger
Mm-hmm.
addiction, porn
Let's not talk
addiction.
about shopping now. Come on.
Right.
I'm not going to admit to that. I'm in denial.
Let me keep my denial nice
Yeah.
and tied up with a bow
Yeah.
on
Shh.
it. But
But
so,
yes, I do. There's
there's
so many.
and so most of us could benefit from a 12
Yeah.
step because, sin is addictive and the
Mm-hmm.
devil he trips every one of us up. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
was perfect but Jesus, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so every person has a struggle. And that's one of the things that helped me to continue to love my husband
Yeah.
and truly forgive is because I I knew that I have struggles.
Yeah.
And as humans, we may differentiate the struggles. We may say, well, that one's worse, that one's
Right.
not as
Right.
bad.
Right.
But in God's sight,
They're
yes,
all.
some struggles have higher consequences,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all displeasing to Him.
Right.
And they're
Right.
all really the same in that way. And
Oh.
so when I, would see Him struggle, um, I just would remember my own struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be
Mm-hmm.
like, He's the same as me. I'm the same as Him.
Right.
He's
Right.
not scum of the earth. I
He's
really
not
admire
worse.
Him
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because He was willing to work on
To
it.
work out of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Yes.
such a beautiful
And
because you're
He
still
inspires
together.
me because
Yeah.
He's
Definitely.
inspired me. And that's what
Yeah.
I've told Him is you empower me to work on myself,
Mm-hmm.
and you inspire me, you empower me. And so that's how our marriage is now. We really strive to, inspire each other, forgive
Mm-hmm.
quickly.
Yes. Yes.
That's part of the 12 steps is forgiving quickly.
Right.
And all these things are good for any marriage. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's a blessing
Oh,
that
yes.
we ended up going to 12 steps because
Mm-hmm.
then we learned all these things that
Mm-hmm.
we
Now
needed
you can impact
anyway.
others. Right. Right. And
And
now
then
you can
we've taught them
impact
to our
others.
children and
Yes.
help them,
Oh, good.
they have
Good.
to do their own healing
Mm-hmm.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do it for them, but like Joe, he's young enough that he's gone to the kids'
Oh,
12-step
good.
study. There is
Good.
a Celebrate Recovery where
I
we
think that is so
started.
needed for our kids
They
today.
have
Yeah.
a children's one and they have
Mm-hmm.
a teenager one, and then you move
Nice.
to the adult
Nice.
level. So,
That is good. That's
yeah.
good. I didn't know they had it for the kids too. That is
Mhm.
wonderful because so many are struggling. I know I was a bus driver, saw it every day and broke my heart
Yes.
where they felt
And
they
if
were
they
in
can
life.
learn these tools early,
Mhm.
then they learn what to do with their anger.
As they get older. Yes. Yes. Because
Yes.
even with their parents, knowing their parents are doing things, they struggle big time with that. And they have a lot of anger and a lot of sadness. And yeah,
And
I know
kids
about
can't
that.
divorce their parent.
No.
They may be yelled at and all
Yeah.
this trauma every day. Just a lot of
Yeah.
things going on. They
Yeah.
can't leave.
Mm-mm.
They're 6 years
They're
old.
in it. Yeah.
This is where I live. This is my
Yeah.
mom. This is my dad.
Yeah.
And they just suffer. So helping them have tools
Mm-hmm.
that they can learn what to one, stay connected to their emotions, because
Mm-hmm.
disconnecting from your emotions is one of the first steps toward addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So helping them to continue to stay
Be able to come
connected.
back. Yeah. Connect. Mm-hmm.
And then to know how to express those emotions in a healthy way. And also teaching them about Jesus, that they're in a
Yes. The most
relationship with
important part.
Him.
Yeah.
He's right there with them. They're
Mhm.
never alone,
Mhm.
and He cares.
Yes.
And, just to really give them awareness that they
Right.
feel Jesus with
In
them
their heart.
in every moment, knowing
Mhm.
Jesus doesn't approve of all these things,
Mm-mm.
but we're in a fallen world where Satan is
Mhm.
loose and
Mhm.
he's allowed some power right now.
Mhm.
And not to get doctrinal, but this is
Right.
just my
Right.
understanding. And so, sharing that with the kids so that because I mean, that's one of the biggest struggles is like, why do people
Mhm.
act this way?
Mhm.
Why is this allowed to happen?
Right.
And just separating the two, understanding
Mhm.
this is Jesus and this is the enemy.
Where it is. Yeah.
And he has some power right now. And
Mhm.
so just hang in there.
Yes.
Keep hanging in there, and know they can reach out to us as mentors in the
Right.
program, because I've
That's good.
taught the children's place, the youngest one.
That's so good.
And it's amazing to see them do their
Mhm.
inventory
Mhm.
and the healing that they get from
That
the
they go
program.
through. Yeah, in that
Mhm.
young age.
Yeah.
So we're wrapping up,
Mhm.
and I want you to talk about, we have some great news coming out on Monday the 29th. Share a little bit
Yes.
about that, and then tell me something that you love to collect, and then we'll be wrapping it up.
Okay. So my podcast launches You Are Significant. And of course, this was inspired from coming out of codependency and learning that I have value, I have self-worth.
Mhm.
God made me. I
Mhm.
was made for a purpose, on
Right.
purpose.
Yeah.
And each person is. There's no
Yes.
zero talent person. Every person has a gift, and
Mhm.
that gift is meant to be shared.
Yeah.
And so we'll be diving into that, and I can't wait to
It's gonna be so
start.
good. So good.
Yes,
I love to be able to
this
support
next
others.
Monday.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm thinking it's a week and it's Monday.
It's this
It's
coming
so
Monday.
exciting.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
you
real
are
quick,
significant.
you are significant, and I'll put all the information in the call so that y'all can click on it and be able to go to it. Also tell us a little bit about something you love to collect. We were talking about before we jumped on.
I'm a hat collector. I love hats. I was telling her, like, does this look dumb? Me having this, I can't put my hat on. I do have my headband on, but
Yeah,
I am a girly girl all the way. And
I
so
love
I've
it.
been collecting hats. And as I was finishing getting ready, Laura and I were on Zoom, and I started to tell her I'm looking for this hat, and telling her, like, every hat has a story. And
Yes.
so it's not even so much about the hats now
It's just
as
about where you got it from and
it's
what it
just,
connects to.
yes.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's precious because that's just something simple but yet significant in your life. So that's really cool. Oh, I just thank you for coming on and being with me today. I loved
Thank you
it.
so much
And
for
sharing
having
your
me.
hard story. That's a hard story
It
to
is
be
a really
talking
hard
about.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, but
So
thank you for
it will
letting me
impact
share.
others, I know. And we'll be playing it soon. We'll talk to you
Thank you,
later.
Laura.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining my podcast today. We all have a story to share. Each story has purpose and makes an impact to you, the listener, creating a journey with passion and purpose. The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Please share with others and subscribe below.